everyone, my name is Cristines Flores, taking the Bachelor of Science in Agriculture, major in Animal Science, section PB in EN Bio. On this video, I am going to discuss the scientific inquiry and unifying themes in biology. But the questions we are discussing right now is about what's the difference between living system and non-living system. The second is my stand about the evolutions of man. The third question is what's the difference between natural selection and artificial selection, and the last is choosing the three unifying themes in biology. So let's start our discussion. I hope you learn on this video. So I mentioned the question a while ago, what's the difference between living and non-living system? When we say about living system, it's referred to the things that were alive and compose many different cells, and to be classified, living system must grow, develop, use energy, reproduce, and also it's sensitive to its environment. These are the characteristics defining the living system or defining the lives. So kapag ang isang bagay na nakikita natin sa paligid na merong growth, lumalaki, merong development or merong pagbabago, at merong use energy or gumagamit siya ng energy galing sa iba't ibang source, and also nagre-reproduce siya ng bagong characteristic, structure, and also sensitive to its environments, means sensitibo siya sa lahat ng bagay or nasasaktan siya. That is defining the living system. For example, human, animals, plants, and also the cells. Those are the examples of living system. On the other hand, non-living things is the things that are anything that was never alive. So, yun yung mga bagay na hindi buhay or wala silang. They cannot reproduce, they cannot grow, they can develop, they cannot use energy, or even they are not sensitive to its environment. So, kapag nakikita mo yung isang bagay na hindi lumalaki, hindi nagde-develop, wala siyang cell, yan po yung mga characteristic ng non-living system. For example, the car and the rock. Maybe we can classify that the rock is growing, but to be true, it is not growing because there are some reasons because of the environment or the climate change, kaya na they have changes. Pero that is an example of non-living things. In a non-living system are important or interact to complete and stable the ecosystem. So, kompleto dapat po ang living and non-living system ay nagsasama sa isang ecosystem. Halimbawa po niyan is if the trees will cut and gagamitin ito na para gumawa ng bahay, yung mga ibang parte ng trees will use another organisms, kagaya ng mga leaves, so it will decompose and becomes a soil. So, yan po yung needed ng non-living and living system. So, the second question is my stand about the evolution of man. According to the scientific study, the evolution of man descended from apes or hominids family. Evolution of man relies on the process by natural selection through change in inheritable traits from a sensor and inherent characteristic from an organism to process growth and development from past organism. This is the evidence that the changes in DNA and protein over the time. So, evolution of man, nanggaling daw yung man sa mga unggoy or hominids family. Doon po yun nanggaling. Dahil sa progression of time, nag-change po yung evolution ng unggoy, kaya naging tao po siya. And another example of the of this situation is how the evolution of cell phones change over the time. So, paano yung mga cellphone? Diba kapag ang cellphone na old model, ngayon mo binili. Kapag ang time is another generation, another time, another month, merong mga madidiscover or merong mga ma-a-adapt of cell phones. The third question is, what's the difference between natural selection and artificial selection? When we say about natural selection, it is a process through which population of living system that reproduce and selected by environment and it may adapt and change over time, and it may result unpredictable. Therefore, ideas that can be classified as a natural selection. The first is the variation of appearance and the behavior. Meaning, yung variation niya galing sa iba or nakukuha niya sa appearance, kung ano yung itsura ng isang animals or ng plants, and kung ano yung mga behavior niya. And the second is the inherent pass on from the parents. So, kung ang isang bagay, kagaya ng animals or the plants, ay nagmamana sila kung ano yung mga genes nila, kung ano yung mga structure nila, namamana nila yon. And then the third is the high population. Dahil sa malaking population, nangyayari ang natural selection dahil sa dami nito. And then the last is different survival and nangyayari din yon sa mga iba't ibang pang-survive nila. So, nangyayari ang natural selection para mabuo or maka-survive pa sila. It is a process by selective breeding process by human, or they can choose a living system to reproduce. The human will be selected to reproduce another organism or to create an offspring. Third question is, choose at least 3 unifying themes and biology. So, what are the unifying themes that I choose? First is the living systems organized into cell. The second is cell information process system. And the last, the molecular basis of inheritance explain the continuity of life. Living system must organize into cell because all living organisms are made up of cell, and cell is a level who carry the process of biological level, which are the tissues, organ system, and organism. These are the organized that can be functioned on the living system. So if the living systems are not organized, there will be a conflicting happen in our ecosystems. Maybe the living things cannot survive on their environment, or maybe they can define a life kasi merong mga conflicting na mangyayari kapag hindi organized ang isang living system. For example, the nerves, the blood cells, the nerve cells, and the bone cells. These examples serves as organized living system because of the blood cells, it can create a nerve cells, and because of the nerve cells, it can process into bone cells. Hindi pwede mangyari na ang bone cells ay mauuna, kaya paano makagawa ng bone cells ng blood cells? Paano makagawa ng bone cells ng nerve cells? Di ba hindi? Kasi walang blood cells at walang nerve cells. Kaya it must be important that living system must organize into cells so that the 7 characteristics will functions very well in our environment and in our body. Second unifying themes and biology that I choose is cell information process and system. We all know that cells is the basic unit of life or in the living system. Cells is one of the level in biological levels, which are the cell, tissues, organ, and organ systems. These are the examples that we can determine at information process to the system. For example, the informations of cells processed to the tissues, and then the information of tissues processed to the organ, and the information of organs processed to the organ systems, and the information of organ system processed to organisms. These are examples of cells information processing to the system. Another examples is cell informations detect and response to environment by energy utilization. Without cell, there is no information process, and it may define the unbalance to the function of the systems. So it's very important that the cell information to the system, so it must be function very well around the body and what's going on around to its environment. The third unifying themes in biology that I choose is the molecular basis of inheritance explain the continuity of life. So we all know that all living organisms are descended from different ancestor. That's maybe inherit genetical materials, or which is the DNA, that can be represents at 80% of all cells that can be in the parents pass on the children. To continuity life to the next generation is an inheritable formation of DNA, cell transmitted in all part of organism. DNA is the best explained by the molecular basis inheritance because DNA can produce itself. For example, if your children lost almost 18 years, you got an information from your investigator or sa ibang tao, then you examine it by the DNA. So, the possibles kasi, di ba, ang mamamana is there around of 80%. So, pag nag-match yung genes mo sa DNA mo, there will be a possibles na anak mo siya. So, malaki ang chances na magkukontinue yung life to the next generation by the DNA formation or inheritance. Mga characteristic na mamamana nyo sa ancestors nyo na magbabago sa sarili nyo kapag nakaka-grow at nakaka-develop na po kayo.